It's good to see all of you, and thank you for being part of this forum today. We are entering into that time of year and that everyone in this room is familiar with, in which we spend some time focusing on our church, on our ministry here, on how we carry out our ministry, and on what it takes to be able financially to do that. And so as we move into this 2023 annual giving campaign, you're going to begin to see this. You'll receive some things in the mail that have this on it, and it says at the bottom, a community of belonging. A community of belonging. And so this is the theme that we want to hold up as we try to help all of us think more about what it means to belong to this community of faith, what it means to be a member of this church, and how there are various ways of belonging. And if you've been to church already, or if you're going to the next service, you'll hear Jay Kanzler talk about that, and one of the things that he mentions is how all of us want to belong. All of us need in some way to belong. And so our focus, as we're still working to help some of the members of our church who have been away for the last few years connect again, is how important it is to belong and how you can belong to St. Peter's. So obviously, one of the things that we focus on during this time of the year, not only are the various ministries of our church, but again, how do we fund those ministries? What does it mean to be stewards? As I mentioned in the prayer that I read, what does it mean to be stewards of God's resources? And sometimes in the church we get a little bit reticent when it comes to talking about money. And we sometimes don't like to talk about it. We're not always comfortable talking about it. And that's not just, obviously, as we all know, that's not just limited to the church. So what I want to do this morning is have a conversation about money in a little different way. This may be something that some of you have been exposed to in the past. I hope so, because I know that this book that I'm going to take some things from is a book that has circulated here, and that I know that Janet Rouse has used, at least with some members of this church, in thinking about stewardship and in giving. But the title of the book is A Spirituality of Fundraising. A spirituality of fundraising. And so let's just cut right to the chase and say you can call it whatever you want in the church. You can call it stewardship, you can call it this, you can call it that, but at the end of the day, what we're trying to do is raise money. We have to have money as a church to be able to carry out our ministry. We have to have money to be able to do the things that we want to do and that we hope to do and that we think that God's calling us to do. So a few years ago, when I was actively involved, and part of my vocation was leading a group of fundraisers for an organization, I came across this book. I was introduced to this book called A Spirituality of Fundraising that's written by Henry Nouwen. Now, some of you I know Henry Nouwen. Some of you may have read Henry Nouwen's books, but if you have not, or if you're not familiar with Henry Nouwen, Henry Nouwen was a Roman Catholic priest who became a prolific writer about the spiritual life, and one of the most prolific writers of the 20th century. And he wrote a lot of books. And I had read many of his books, and Henry Nouwen for me was someone who had been a mentor, even though I never met him in person. But I had no idea that he had written a book about fundraising. And so when I came across this book, I was intrigued by it. It's a very short little book, as you can see, and I remember reading it on a flight that I was on, and thinking, wow, this is something that I had been looking for and didn't really even know that it was out there. So I want to share some things with you that Henry Nouwen has to say about the spirituality of fundraising. Because again, what we're trying to do is to raise funds to be able to support the ministry of this church. And I think that the more we can have honest, open, candid conversation about our needs, about our wants, about our desires, and about the process that it takes to go through that, then we're better able and better equipped to be able to respond to God's call on us to be good stewards of what we have. Now, a number of the members of our vestry are here this morning, and I want to thank them for being here. For the last several weeks, they have been carefully and thoughtfully thinking through the process of budgeting and of preparing and a budget that will be that they're going to meet again tomorrow night, preparing a budget that will be presented next week at our annual meeting. And so I want us to be able to, in a few minutes, potentially have some conversation with them about that process, about what it takes, about what they're thinking about. And I also want to introduce two members of the vestry who are also have agreed to be the co-chairs of this year's annual giving campaign, Josh Schaefer and Laura Frank, who are sitting right back there. So as you know, you often hear from the clergy. You're going to hear Jay's sermon this morning. You'll hear me go on about it. But I thought it was important this year that we have a couple of people who can say, this is what it means to me. This is why I serve God here, and to be the faces of our annual giving campaign. So again, this is Henry Nouwen's book. I commend it to you and invite you to if you have not read it again. It doesn't take much to read through this. Jacqueline. So let's play that first video, please. I want you to hear from someone who makes a few comments. This is some comments that this person made to a group of seminary students about Henry Nouwen's writing.
Tragically require reality that the institutional bills must be paid. When we ask someone for financial assistance, we can feel demeaned, as if it's a form of begging. Or we can feel like we are being a nuisance, and the folks will wince inside when they see us approach with hands outstretched. We are on the other end of the transaction. When we are asked for a contribution, we can feel exploited, used. The suspicion inevitably arises that people are just being nice to us in order to get their greedy little hands in our pockets. So it was with utter shock that I read the very profound spiritual author Henry Nouwen's claim that fundraising is a very rich and beautiful activity. It is a confident, joyful, and hope-filled expression of ministry. That's a quote. Come on, Henry. Are you serious? Beautiful? Joyful? A stewardship campaign? In the same extravagant vein, he continued, fundraising is first and foremost a form of ministry. It is as spiritual as giving a sermon, entering a time of prayer, visiting the sick, or feeding the hungry. It's as spiritual as those activities. This is doubly unbelievable to me, coming from a man who was so otherworldly, so obviously more at home in a prayer chapel than in a bank office, that he seemed almost oblivious to the power or even the existence of money.
So, as you just heard, and he was someone who had an opportunity to spend some time in graduate school, getting to know Henry Nouwen, and so one of the things that immediately struck me about this particular little book and the things that Nouwen says in it revolve around thinking about money and thinking about raising money, thinking about fundraising as being a ministry, as being something, as he points out, that's equally as important as what those of us who preach and teach and celebrate the Eucharist and do those types of things are. And that was quite frankly revelatory for me. I had just not ever really thought about it that way. Have any of you? Didn't think so. So now it says that fundraising, he describes fundraising as being something that's rich, that's beautiful, that it's confident, that it's joyful, and it's hope-filled. Now, some of you I know that Laura, I know that Louise Jones, I know there are a few people in here, and there may be many others who have been involved in some way in fundraising. And some of you have had experiences with people who've come to you from nonprofits or other organizations trying to solicit you or try to get you to in some way support their organization. And you may have experienced a significant lack of confidence, joy, or hopefulness. Because sometimes even those who are involved in that type of work tend to kind of be Eeyore-ish, like Matt, But what Nowen wants to try to help us to see is that that's not the approach. Because what we're doing is approaching it in a way that, again, because it's a form of ministry, that is something that should be joyful, that should be filled with confidence, and that should be something that is grounded in a sense of hope, for the future. And then he goes on to say that from the perspective of the gospel, fundraising is never a response to a crisis. That we're never, if you've been involved on a board or in fundraising, you know that there's two different types of fundraising. There is crisis fundraising that comes about when an organization is at the point that the lights may not be able to be turned on anymore, where there may not be able to be personnel involved in any form of the organization, and that involves crisis fundraising. If this doesn't happen, if we don't get this money, this won't go forward. And then there's the type of fundraising that Nowen describes as being confident and joyful and hope-filled, which says, Jacqueline, that what we're trying to say is not, please help us out because things are so bad or they've been so difficult lately, but what we're trying to say is that we're doing something that's really exciting. We're doing something that's meaningful, that's impactful, that's making a difference, and we have a vision for that that we see going forward, and that's why we want you to participate in being part of that. Now, the reality of fundraising or any type of fundraising, the goal is always to try to match the passion that someone has for what it is that we're trying to do. Without passion, it's very difficult to get someone to give. In other words, many of you are passionate about a variety of things. If you have a passion for animals that have been abused, then you're very willing to be part of helping to support organizations that take care of that and try to prevent that, aren't you? If you have a passion for music, and someone from the St. Louis Symphony comes to you and says, I would like for you to be part of this, and you have a passion for that, you're willing to participate in it. And so what we're trying to do in the church is to hopefully find the point, your passion point, our passion points, to where we say, this place means something to me, I am passionate about it, and to say, and because of that, then I want to help out. This is exciting. What we're doing is amazing, and I want to be part of that. So you see the difference between this, oh gosh, could you just please help us out? And what we're doing is exciting, and it's invigorating, and it's important. Okay. So as I admitted earlier, that sometimes I think that we tend to separate fundraising from being something that's truly spiritual, and as Nowen pointed out earlier, and as the person that we heard from mentioned, separate it from being a ministry. Because we tend to say, oh, okay, well, we have a finance committee and we have a vestry, and the finance committee is going to do this, and the vestry is going to do that, and then the vestry is going to approve a budget, and then we're going to have an annual giving campaign, and this is what we do because this is what we have to do. But when we separate that from being part of who we are as people who say that we are followers of Jesus and that we follow Jesus in this way, in this place, and at this time, then we're going about it in the wrong way. If it's just about fundraising and raising money, then there's always going to be a floor. But when we approach it from the standpoint of this is part of our ministry and part of what we do, then it changes things. And so sometimes also we believe that because we have to ask for money, then we don't have a plan. That if our failure to plan well or trust enough that God will provide for all of our needs. One of the things, one of the things that I shared with the vestry when they were in the process of beginning their thinking about what had been presented to them from the finance committee was something written by an Old Testament scholar whose name is Walter Brueggemann, who talks and has written something several years ago actually called the myth of scarcity and the liturgy of abundance. The myth of scarcity and the liturgy of abundance, in which he talks about how we are people who are driven by the myth that we're never going to have enough. That we never are going to have enough and that we never do have enough. But the reality is, as Brueggemann points out, in the Bible shows that over and over and over again, God who is faithful and God who was faithful and God who is faithful always provided. Always in some way provided. And so this idea that well, it's just, you just haven't done what you need to do, you haven't done it well enough, then means that we're not saying in some way that God will provide. Now that doesn't negate the necessity of a finance committee or a vestry or of the reality that it does take money. But what it also has to incorporate is that sense of abundance and living into that in some way. When we're faithful, what we're shown through Holy Scripture and what we can see when we look at our lives is that in some way God always provides. So you've heard this about fundraising as a form of ministry, and then when we ask people for money to strengthen or to expand the work of the kingdom, and we are part of the. This is our little tiny, whatever part of the totality of God's kingdom here at St. Peter's that we have the opportunity and the privilege to be part of. We're also then inviting people now and says into a new spiritual communion, into a way of thinking and being that is something new, that's something again hopeful, that's something joyful, that's something filled with confidence, and that when we're talking about money, when we're inviting people to participate in helping to provide what we need through money, that we're always also working to create new relationships. We're also trying to build on what we have, but also at the same time to create relationships with each other where we can have conversations about money and about our relationship with money and about what it takes to make this church continue to be what it has been for now almost 155 years. I think that's right. Yes, thank you. Okay. So whether we're asking for money or whether we're giving money, now and says, we're drawn together by God. Whether we're asking or giving, what brings us together, what draws us together is not somebody asking you, not just Josh and Laura standing up and saying, here, we're the co-chairs of the annual giving campaign, fill out a pledge card. What we're saying is that we're being drawn together by our sense of who we are as people who follow Christ in this place at this time. We're drawn together by God. And that when we ask for money, what we're saying is that we're giving people an opportunity. We're giving all of us an opportunity to put our resources, whatever that may be, into God's hands. And to say we trust and have enough faith that what we're doing in this place is important enough that we want to give. Remember that sense of passion meeting what it is that you're willing to support and how you're willing to support that. And that when we raise funds, he says we're giving ourselves the chance to invest what we have in God's work. To give part of what we have to God, back to God. Again, that myth of scarcity, that liturgy of abundance, believing that whatever we give then will be used in such a way to build the kingdom of God, to help promote the kingdom of God through our ministry here in this place. And then now it talks about fundraising, raising money as always being a call to conversion. To be converted, he says, means to experience a deep shift in how we see and how we think and in how we act. Now, conversion, I don't know, is always a word that we use a lot. But what he, I think, is trying to help us to see is, again, is the power and of what it means to be willing to give of yourself in some way through your financial resources. And as he says, that comes with meaning that comes with an understanding that we're going to see things in a different way, we're going to think in a different way, and we're going to act in a different way because of that willingness to let go and to recognize that we live out of a sense of abundance and that we're participating in the work of Christ through this church and in other ways. And don't, I mean, yes, we're about to launch an annual giving campaign, and we need all of us to be part of that. But as we all know, there are other things that we give to. There are other things that we support. And that's a good thing. There's no one ever says, and if they did, then it's probably one of those televangelists that didn't make it. When they say, give, and all that you give should come into funding this, my airplane, my huge house, and this ministry, et cetera, et cetera. Stewardship is holistic. But one part of that is how it is that you give in support of this place, of this ministry, and of what we do here. Okay, I want you to. I do have one more. Okay, we can move beyond that. I think I've said that. All right, I want you to hear once again from this the person that we heard from initially, who was talking to this group of seminarians.
Prayer enables us to be sensitive to God's unmerited grace. It enables us to unearth the deepest roots of our idolatry and face them squarely, surrounded by the love of God. And we become more conscious of God's compassion, then gratitude grows in our hearts. And the rise of gratitude overflows the boundaries of our self-concern and opens our eyes to the reality that everything that we have is from God, and opens our hands to share our God-given gifts and to receive them from others. Now, it ends his curious little book on fundraising with a celebration of fundraising and fund giving as a joyful, God-given exercise in mutuality and reciprocity. Trusting that God has already given us everything that we ultimately need, we can approach the ministry of fundraising without the paranoid fear that we might be rebuffed. We can ask for help without envy, suspicion, trepidation, or resentment. We can hope that through our efforts, a community of the mutual sharing of gifts and the service of God will be born. But we will not be disheartened or disillusioned if it is not. No matter what eventuates, we can rest confident in God's love, with our vision fixed on God's coming reign. So that's the JIT.
All right, so I would welcome your thoughts, your ideas. As I mentioned, there are a number of members of our vestry who are here today, and I'll willingly pass the mic on to one or more of them if you have a thought or comment. Remember I said, money, people don't like to talk. Yes, ma'am.
So we know somebody, we have a friend who's an amazing fundraiser, and he once said, this will be over by the time you get it. Sorry. He said that he had this great view, similar to this, that fundraising is really giving somebody, when you walk in to ask for money, you're giving this person an opportunity to do the very thing they really want to do. And to fulfill themselves in a way that they don't otherwise have an opportunity to do it. And I just thought that was such a lovely view.
Mm-hmm. It is. Thank you. Other thoughts? Members of the vestry, would you like to say something?
David, we're coming back through some rough periods, and with David here leading us, we are heading to, a great and bright future. But the fundraising is very important this year, as it is every year. And those of us who are in the church and active in the church, I think just need to be mindful that we've come through a tough period. We went through a COVID and a Rector search and a lot of changes. And we're still here, we're still strong, and we're going to be even better in the future.
Mm-hmm. Great.
Thought maybe I could remove some of the mystery around how we come to a budget. Because we changed the process this year. It was my first year as a member of the vestry to participate in the budgeting side. But in years past, the finance committee had basically constructed the budget.
They can be given out.
Without any input from the vestry. It was given to the vestry goes to the I would say in most cases they go to EA. This year we took a much more holistic approach. The finance committee did some initial work to come up with the framework of the budget, identifying some key questions on both the revenue side and the expense side. And the entire vestry, we've spent the last, we had one special meeting where we spoke of nothing but the budget. We had a second meeting where a large component of it was going through the budget. Great conversations, heartfelt feelings were shared, and some great ideas came out of it. And we'll be meeting again, as David said, on Tuesday of this week to finalize and vote on the final approval. So the process has been changed. I think it's a much more inclusive and representative process than what we've done in the past.
Thank you, Alan. And I can say to you that your vestry, at that last meeting that Alan referenced, had a significant amount of very productive conversation with each other, engagement with each other that I think is healthy, and I can tell you that they are representing you all very, very well in a very thoughtful and intentional way.
I just wanted to ask, it could be from a member of the vestry or whoever, but what specifically, can you tell us what areas the church is in need of? I know overall they need money, but there's probably things that we really, really need, and I'm not aware of what those things are, and if I'm not, maybe other people aren't, and that would give more emphasis to say, well, I'd like to help get that or do that.
Just briefly, so I work with Keith Forrest on buildings and grounds. And this year, we needed significant HVAC work. Our beautiful roof, we needed to, I think every 20 years roughly, the slate roof needs significant maintenance. So there's some things that are less glamorous, right? Always, but need to be done and need to be taken care of. I'm not sure the specific amount that the work cost off the top of my head. I want to say $150,000 to $200,000 just for the HVAC and the slate roof. But from a building and ground standpoint, you know, to keep the beautiful facility going, there's going to be continued expenses in that regard. I don't know if any other member of the vestry has specific areas.
Of just even the carpeting throughout the church?
True, yep, the carpeting throughout the church, if you notice,
If you look in the aisle in the church, the red carpeting, and then if you walk through the back doors of the church here and you just go up into the office space, and you think of the carpeting leading up into the office space as the place that welcomes the staff and the clergy every day. It's not very appealing and enticing and luring you in every day. And that's something that someone might not think of, and it's not very glamorous, but it certainly would make a big difference in the day of our staff and clergy every day if they came in to see that.
And I would just add to that. I have mentioned a few of the sort of capital improvements that are ongoing. Things just sort of come up every few years. But the church also is engaged in a tremendous amount of outreach into the community, and we get invitations to participate in some really exciting and wonderful outreach opportunities. We were presented with one just at the last vestry meeting, and that takes money. And so we have to make trade-off decisions as to what we can and can't do, and having the budget to do more allows St. Peter's to reach into the community and have a greater impact in the broader St. Louis area.
How does this year's budget compare to previous year's budgets, and how much are we going to be raising?
I'm gonna maybe dodge the question a little bit, because, as I mentioned, the vestry will meet this week, and we'll finalize and approve the budget. And, David, I believe that will be shared at the annual meeting.
Correct.
Yes,
Yeah.
so, which next week, so we'll be able to talk more freely and openly about it at that point.
But it's fair to say that we're trying to get back to where we were pre-COVID. The budget was down over the past couple of years. It was down over the past couple of years. We're trying to get back to where it was before the pandemic and before we had some personnel who left, and there was a gap there. So trying to get back to full function.
Charlie, I also think it's fair to say that the budget's pretty lean. There's very little wiggle room, and as we sit down and dissect the budget and go through it, it's just impossible to find ways that we can cut without significantly cutting personnel or programs that are important to us, and I think that's what's posed such a challenge to us. They're just not areas where we're running a lean machine, in my opinion.
Okay, back to you, Cheryl.
Sure.
To Josh and to Laura, who had to go to choir practice, I guess. The challenge for St. Peter's in my time here, we're the core group. We're gonna step up, and Josh said in his remarks, or maybe it was David, we have 400 families and 300 pledging units is what we're looking for. The challenge in our fundraising is to extend ownership in St. Peter's to more than this hardcore group. I remember when Meryl and I were going to a different Episcopal parish in our diocese, and my mother and father went to church here. Granted, we were at a church with smaller number of families, like maybe 100. But our average pledge at this smaller church was a few $1,000s per pledging unit, more than at St. Peter's. And my dad, Brig, how can that be? And I think that there are too many that they look at our address here, we're doing Warson in the heart of this affluent suburb. Look at the names of the people. We don't have a roster anymore. We used to have a roster, and we'd say, oh, well, angels will step up and take care of this. Times are different now. We all know we're all challenged, and I think David's remarks and Alan's approach is exciting and wonderful here this morning. And if we can just extend this ownership idea to more of us, I think we'll once again meet the challenge of our budget.
Great. Thank you. There we go.
Just a question to heighten awareness so people really know what needs money. Is there any way to make it apparent that we would have put these things in a category? Maybe you already did, like ongoing expenses, like heat, air conditioning, but every year you need so much. And then other things that maybe you just need to replace once every 10 years, like carpeting, So, I mean, you could see the difference of it takes this much just to run the church. And then there's all these other things we would like to do as improvements. I mean, I think, I don't know, but I just think if I saw something put out like that, I'd say, oh, I didn't know the church needed carpeting here. And I didn't realize that it cost $150,000 a year just to run this. I mean, maybe you already did that. I don't know, but.
Maybe I can address that from the stewardship campaign. I think one of the things that we're trying to do, and Alan alluded to it, the budgeting process, is present greater transparency to these very issues and talk about, we're not going to get into every detail about expenses, what carpet needs to be replaced, although that will be discussed I think we'll have an opportunity next week if we want to get into the budget then. But what we're trying to do is create more transparency to the point where I don't think people know even how many families are a part of the St. Peter's congregation, how many are giving, and how many more we need. And through this campaign, we're going to have some nice little infographics that talk about that, so people are aware that maybe we do need to step up a little bit more and increase our contributions. And I think with that transparency, we'll address some of those challenges. But that is the challenge that you mentioned is one that we as a vestry talk about a lot. Increasing the sense of ownership, increasing the sense of belonging to the church, but also creating new opportunities for people to feel that sense of belonging. A great example is the 5 o'clock service now for either younger families or people who can't make it on Sunday mornings, and reaching out to the community in different ways to provide them that sense of belonging, but also in return asking for contributions and pledges. So that's a big part of the stewardship campaign is trying to address that challenge.
Another thing I'd like to know is who are the agencies that have requested money that we can't serve.
I don't know that we can't serve them. What we have not had enough funds to do is to create much of an outreach component to the budget. So most recently, what Josh was referencing was a request that all churches in our diocese were asked to consider that comes from Rockwell House, which is the campus ministry program at WashU. They have an extensive renovation project that they need to undertake to be able to provide the upkeep and maintenance on the house that the students come to and that's part of that ministry. Charlie Claggett brought something to me. When was that, Charlie? In the last few months, in which there was asking if we might participate in something that would have been wonderful for us to be able to participate in. And I think it was about $5,000. And I had to go back to Charlie and say, we don't have that. We don't have that in our budget to be able to do that. So with there, and just most recently, our Christmas offering was designated to go to what's called the Jubilee Ministry, which is one of the ministries of the diocese. And the deacon who is leading that ministry is going to start a food truck to take into different places in the city that are those what are called food deserts. And so, again, we didn't have any outreach money for us to do that, but I was able to designate the Christmas offering to go to provide some support for that.
What I'm saying is, what you were talking about is letting us know, like if we knew as a congregation, the outreach truck or whatever it is needed money and we can't do it. Just like somebody came up with $1 million for an organ. Somebody out there might come up with, but if we don't know it, we just don't know it.
Yeah.
And that's not exactly in our budget, but it has to do with knowledge of what's going on in the community.
This is wonderful conversation, and you all are invited to stay and continue to have it, but I can't be part of it anymore right now. Thank you for engaging with this. What I just want to make one closing comment to you is that I think you all are aware of this. Overall, we are a financially healthy church. We are. We have a nice endowment. For us to really be financially sound, as one of my friends who's a consultant says, everybody's endowment ought to be doubled what it is. But we have a healthy endowment. We've received almost close to $750,000 this year that has just come in from gifts that were designated and planned gifts that we however many years ago. You walk in here, you walk upstairs, if you think, wow, this is beautiful. Everything's taken care of. But the reality is that this church for quite a while has had a challenge in making this annual giving campaign be successful. And I'll just be candid with you, I don't really get that. In this setting and with all of us who make up this setting. So I think that's why these conversations are helpful, and I hope that as someone said, as Briggs said, this is the core group. And I hope that as members of the core group, what you'll do is take this message out and have conversations with other people about it. And we'll create as many opportunities as we need to. And part of the annual giving campaign is going to be some house meetings where we'll be inviting people in for these types of conversations in a little different and more intimate setting. Thank you.